Hello, Internet. As you know, this week, especially Friday, 11/22, is the 50-year celebration of whenever President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be going on this week where people talk about it and talk about how awesome or terrible, how tragic it was. But inside of my brain, there's like way back here, there's part of my brain that's still 10 years old. The 10-year-old Isaiah Campbell wants to know, where the heck were all the superheroes when President Kennedy was assassinated? Superman would swoop down, or Spider-Man would swing across buildings, or, something. So I decided to do some research, and I went and looked at comic books from the time that President Kennedy was assassinated. So it's important for you to remember that comic book cover dates are always showing 2 months later than when they were actually on the racks to be on sale. Comic books that came out November of 1963 or dated January of 1964. So just keep that in mind. Superman was helping Hercules with some red kryptonite that apparently for Hercules was the same as green kryptonite. Batman and Robin were fighting these flaming twin people who were just being shot off of this astrology dude's costume. Spider-Man was having a teenage experience with the Human Torch. So the Avengers were fighting the Hulk and Submariner. Tony Stark, as Iron Man, was fighting Angel because Angel flew over a nuclear testing site and nuclear radiation affected Angel's emotions, and so he got kind of angry. 10-year-old Isaiah, here's the answer to your question. The superheroes were all too busy to be bothered to help out the president. It's kind of disconcerting. You have to remember, obviously, that the stories that came out in November were written prior to November. Assassination of President Kennedy wouldn't have affected those stories at all. We look forward a couple of months and how the assassination of President Kennedy affected the comic books later on. One comic book, one that I think best shows how the assassination of President Kennedy did actually affect the writers. That was Avengers #4. The Submariner, who had just gotten beat by the Avengers, went up north, and he went to this place where these Inuits were having a special religious ceremony with the body of a frozen person. The Submariner's so angry, he grabs the frozen person and throws the frozen person into the ocean. The frozen person is eventually recovered by the Avengers, and defrosted frozen person was, in fact, Captain America. And when you think about that in light of the assassination of President Kennedy, I don't know if Stan Lee had that in mind. He probably had already been thinking about it for months and months prior. The death of the leader of our country, and then in the comic books, you have the rebirth of Captain America. Whereas in other countries, the assassination of a leader is like overthrow of government, where you have revolution. In our country, we've had presidents assassinated not just one time, not just 2 times, but multiple times. And other presidents have died in office. And yet, every time that's happened, our country has risen, and our country has been stronger, much like how Captain America was reborn from the ice. The story of President Kennedy's assassination reminds us that our country will always rise out of the ashes. Yes, it's very sad. November 22nd, 1963 was the day that our president was assassinated. But just a little bit later, Captain America came. The American spirit can't be killed. It will live on. See you later, Internet.